Adjective clauses can be super confusing, but stay tuned because in this video, I'll be breaking them down and making sure you understand how to use them. Hi friends, I'm Dr. B, the ESL doctor. I've been helping students learn English for almost 20 years, and on this channel, I make videos with English lessons and tips to help you improve your English and connect your world. So if that sounds good to you, please consider subscribing below. Okay, so let's get started talking about adjective clauses. First, I want to explain what adjective clauses are and why they're so important. Then we'll go through how to make subject-adjective clauses, and then I will finish with explaining the difference between defining and non-defining adjective clauses. So to understand adjective clauses, let's go back and understand what adjectives are. So first of all, adjectives are words that describe nouns. They describe people, places, things, ideas, and concepts. Adjective clauses similarly describe nouns. However, they're clauses. Clauses are groups of words with a subject and verb, but they are dependent. That means that they cannot stand alone like sentences. They don't form complete thoughts. So once again, an adjective clause is a group of words, a clause, with a subject and verb that is dependent on another sentence to form a complex sentence or an independent idea. So now that we have a brief understanding on what adjective clauses are, let's go through why they're so important in English. Well, adjective clauses can be used in speaking, but they're more frequently seen and used in writing. If you write very simple and short sentences, adjective clauses can help make your writing more fluid and more complex. They'll take short beginner level sentences and make them more advanced, longer, and more developed. Basically, adjective clauses take your writing to the next level. They step up your writing, making it more complex, but keeping it very understandable and comprehensible for your readers. So it's a really effective tool and pretty simple to use. So let's get started in learning how to make adjective clauses. Adjective clauses can be considered the combination of two separate sentences. Today we'll be looking at subject-adjective clauses. So the subject of the second sentence will be reflected somewhere within the first sentence. Before we get too technical though, let's look at some examples that'll make it a bit easier to understand how to create one sentence using two sentences and a subject-adjective clause. On your screen, you're going to see three different girls. Girl number 1 loves doing yoga. Girl number 2 loves cooking. And girl number 3 loves studying English. If I simply say, I know the girl, do you know which girl I'm talking about? No. We need more information to help describe the girl. So let's imagine I have two sentences. I know the girl. She loves studying English. Now, do you know which girl I'm talking about? Yes. The second sentence gives more detail and informs us on which girl we are describing. Now, right now, these two sentences are a bit choppy. They're separate. We can combine them using an adjective clause. So let's go into the second sentence. We notice that our subject of the second sentence, she, is reflected in the first sentence. It reflects the girl. So we can use a relative pronoun, who, to replace she. Let's take a step back. Relative pronouns for adjective clauses can be who, which, or that. Who and that refer to people. Which and that refer to things, concepts, and ideas. Now, sometimes students ask me, well, what do we do with animals? And that can be a tricky situation. Animals that have names, or your pet, your family pet, we often use who because we consider them part of the family. And animals in general, animals without names, are often considered things. And in those cases, we use which or that. But remember, we can use the word that, the relative pronoun that, for both people and things. So if you're ever confused, use that. Later in this video, we'll go through in more detail which one we need to use specifically, but as a good rule of thumb, that is more universal than who or which. So now let's go back to our original sentences. We have, I know the girl, she loves studying English. Once again, we can change the word she and replace it with the relative pronoun for people, who or that. Today we'll use who for people, so who. Now we have an adjective clause. Who loves studying English? Within that adjective clause, we have a subject, who. We have a verb, loves. However, who loves studying English is not a complete idea. It needs an independent sentence to form a complex sentence. So you can't just say, who loves studying English? That's not enough. It's not a complete thought. Now, when we look at who, we are discussing the girl. Who loves studying English helps to describe the girl within the first sentence. And so our adjective, who loves studying English, must go directly after the noun that it describes. So together we have, I know the girl who loves studying English. Let's look at our three girls once more. Girl number 1 loves doing yoga. Girl number 2 loves cooking. And girl number 3 loves studying English. However, instead of using the sentence, I know the girl, let's use another sentence. The girl gets good grades. Now, let's say I have the combination of two sentences. The girl gets good grades. She loves studying English. Once again, I can combine these two sentences. First step, I change the subject of the second sentence, she, and I use a relative pronoun. In this case, we're going to use who because it's a person. So now my adjective clause is who loves studying English. Now we look back at our first sentence. The girl gets good grades. In this case, we're still describing the girl. But notice that the girl is also the subject of the first sentence. As I mentioned in the previous step, the adjective clause must go directly after the noun that it describes. So in this case, we're going to say, the girl who loves studying English gets good grades. Now be careful. Many times students will simply say, the girl who loves studying English, and they won't complete the thought. They won't complete the first sentence. And this is wrong. The girl who loves studying English is not a complete idea. It's not a complex sentence. So don't forget to complete the idea. The girl who loves studying English gets good grades. So now let's look at a few sentences and let's try to combine them using subject-adjective clauses. Just a rule of thumb, remember we use who or that for people and which or that for things, concepts, and ideas. And also don't forget that the adjective clause goes directly after the noun it describes. And one more thing, within adjective clauses, the relative pronoun and the verb must agree. So for example, if the relative pronoun is describing a singular noun, then the verb must be a singular verb. And likewise, if the relative pronoun is describing a plural noun, then you must use a plural verb within the adjective clause. Take a few seconds using those tips try to combine the sentences that you see using an adjective clause. Okay, so let's check our answers. In sentence number 1, we have, I just met a man. He lives in Doha. Together, using an adjective clause, we have, I just met a man who lives in Doha. Okay, in example number 2, we have, I love the woman. She babysits my children. We change the subject she using the relative pronoun who or that, and we place it directly after the noun it describes. So, I love the woman who babysits my children. Number 3 could be a little tricky. I hope you got it. So in number 3, we have, the reporter had a lot of questions. She interviewed me. So in the second sentence, we change the subject she using the relative pronoun who or that. But remember, we need to move the adjective clause so that it's directly after the noun it's describing. In this case, the reporter. So together, your final combination sentence should be, the reporter who interviewed me had a lot of questions. And let's look at the fourth example. The students are respectful. They live on my floor. So we change the subject, they, to the relative pronoun who. Now keep in mind, we're referring to a plural noun, the students. So we need to make sure we're using a plural verb, live. So here for the final example, the students who live on my floor are respectful. Now on your screen, I've put a few sentences with mistakes with adjective clauses. And these are common mistakes that I've seen many students make. So take a few seconds to identify what the mistakes are and take it a step further. Try to find out how you can fix it to make the sentence correct. In example number 1, I hope that you caught that the adjective clause is not in the correct position. Remember, adjective clauses must go directly after the nouns that they describe. In the sentence that I've given you, it's actually after an adjective. The adjective clause should go directly after the people. And so that's the mistake with sentence number 1. In the second sentence, we have the tutor who helped me. This is not a complete idea. Although we have the subject, the tutor, and we have the adjective clause, who helped me, we don't have enough information. We're missing the extra part of the first sentence. So to complete this thought, to complete this idea, you could say, the tutor who helped me was very patient. We just need some extra information to complete the idea to make it a complex sentence. And finally, in our third sentence, we notice that the adjective clause that we're using doesn't reflect the noun that it's describing. Here we have a plural noun, but the verb in our adjective clause is a singular verb. Remember, we need to match the noun that we're describing. So plural noun needs a plural verb. And so we should change it from was to were. Earlier, we talked about using the different relative pronouns, who, that, and which. And I explained that I would be going into more detail about when you use each specific relative pronoun. That brings us to defining and non-defining adjective clauses. These are also known as identifying and non-identifying adjective clauses. Adjective clauses that define or identify who our noun is are essential. They're necessary. And then we have adjective clauses that are non-essential, not necessary. And these are non-identifying or non-defining. Let's look at an example that'll make it be a bit more simpler. So imagine I have the sentence, the girl who has brown hair is my tutor. In this sentence, who has brown hair is my adjective clause. Now we need to decide if it's necessary, identifying or defining, or not necessary, non-identifying, non-defining. Let's look at a picture. So if we look at this picture, we have 4 girls and only one of them has brown hair. However, the adjective clause, who has brown hair, helps us to identify which girl I'm talking about. If I don't have that adjective clause, I simply have the girl is my tutor. Do you know which girl I'm talking about? Probably not. We need the adjective clause here. It's essential to help us identify or define which girl I'm describing. So in this case, I can use the relative pronoun who or the relative pronoun that. Imagine I have another situation with the same sentence. The girl who has brown hair is my tutor. But as we see in this image, there's only one girl and there's a group of boys. Without the adjective clause, if I simply saw the girl is my tutor, you could identify which girl I'm describing or which person is my tutor. The adjective clause is not necessary. It does not define or it does not identify which person I'm describing. It's not necessary. It's extra information. So in this case, we can only use the relative pronoun who, and we must put commas before and after the adjective clause. In the case where the adjective clause is at the end of a sentence, we use a comma before the adjective clause and a period after the adjective clause. Let's look at another example. The bald man who has a red shirt is my husband. In this example, we have more than one man who's bald, and so we need the adjective clause, who has a red shirt, to help us identify or define our noun. In this case, it's necessary. So we have the option to use the relative pronoun who or the relative pronoun that. And here's another example. The bald man who has a white shirt is my husband. In this case, there's only one man with no hair, only one man who's bald. So the information who has a white shirt is extra information. It does not help us to identify or define. It's non-identifying, non-defining. And in this case, we can only use the relative pronoun who, and we must have punctuation before and after the adjective clause. Let's look at another example, but this time we'll look at how to use which or that in our adjective clauses. So in our example here, the dog which has black fur saved me from drowning. In the image here, we have many animals, dogs and cats. And so the information which has black fur is necessary. It helps us to identify or define the noun that we're describing. It helps us to identify or define the dog we're describing in this case. So for this example, we can use either the relative pronoun which or the relative pronoun that. And we do not need any punctuation. Similarly, we have another sentence. The dog which has black fur saved me from drowning. And in this really cute picture, as you can see, there's only one dog. And so the adjective clause, which has black fur, is extra information. It's non-identifying, non-defining, not necessary. In this case, we must use the relative pronoun which, and we must have punctuation before and after the adjective clause. Speaking of punctuation, we know that we can easily see punctuation when writing, but how do you use punctuation when speaking? Well, because we can't show our listeners that we're using commas or that our adjective clauses are identifying, there's a few key tips here. One, we often use the relative pronoun that to show identifying or defining adjective clauses. Also, we do not take any pauses around the adjective clauses when speaking. For example, the dog that has black fur saved me from drowning. Notice I used the adjective clause starting with the relative pronoun that, and there were no pauses. However, in non-defining, non-identifying adjective clauses, we'll take a pause before and after the adjective clause to show that it is a non-defining, non-identifying adjective clause. For example, the dog, which has black fur, saved me from drowning. As you can see, adjective clauses are a super effective tool to help you take your English ability to the next level. It really helps step up your writing from basic, simple sentences to more complex ideas and thoughts. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider subscribing, because in our next video, we'll be looking at how to show agreement and disagreement. And in the meantime, why don't you check out one of my previous videos here and here. See you next time.